Order, please.
Oh, don't worry. I'll talk to you during a break because I want to get my script right.
Okay, and Jerry, could you please do a roll call?
Manuel Baca.
Present.
Jeffrey Baum.
Here.
Natalie Berg. Joseph J. Belansky Jr.
Present.
Danny Hawkins.
Here.
Lance Izumi.
Here.
Deborah Malumed. Henry Ramos.
Here.
Gary Reed.
Here.
Jarena Storm.
Here.
Ning Yang.
Here.
Board Member Storm, could you please lead us in the pledge?
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I don't have a long report. I just want to comment on the CCLC, the Community College League, had their one of the trustee meetings, conferences up in Lake Tahoe this past weekend. And there were a couple of sessions that were of particular interest. One of them was on accreditation. We had a panel that included Barbara Bino with the Accrediting Commission, along with three others who have a lot of background in accreditation processes, and provided some insights as to the trustees that were there, to the role of the trustee and the relationship with their CEO on the various campuses. And of course, we continue to have great involvement in the accreditation process and trying to help colleges understand and recognize the implications of the accreditation process, and having them recognize that accreditation, after all, isn't something that occurs every 6 years, but an ongoing process. And that was delivered. I think it was extremely helpful to the people that were there attending, the trustees and others, and very helpful. So that was one of them. The other session was on massive open online courses, MOOCs, and that was very enlightening. We had a individual Stanford faculty member, Andrew Nigg, who is one of the co-founders, involved with Coursera, and one of the co-founders of these massive open online courses. I found, and Vice Chancellor Skinner was a member of the panel. Incoming Academic Senate President, Vice President Beth Smith was also on that panel, along with Brian King, who is the new Chancellor of American River College. And a lot of insight from all the panel members, but Andrew's insight was of particular interest to me because, you know, he's the guy that is pushing this and developing it. And his view of it is that it is a very helpful tool that is among a number of tools that can be used for learning online. But in his view, it does not replace the more traditional forms of online instruction, and certainly shouldn't be construed in that. He has a course that is attended or taken by 100,000 students. Now, you know, we don't have to think too deeply about the ability of one person to be able to interact with those. And he made a very strong point that essentially the thing that students in the end need is that instructor contact, and that contact and live contact with other students. So that was a very interesting one. But overall, it was a good conference, and with that, I'll turn it over to our Chancellor for his report.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. Just a few quick items. First, let me express my sincere appreciation to the members of the board and to all of you constituent leaders and audience members for allowing us to sort of pilot test a different format on the Board of Governor meeting. The board will sort of assess how this works, and at subsequent meetings, you'll either see this approach carrying on or some modification, or the board may elect to go back to the other way of doing it. But again, to all of you who had schedules changed as a result of this, we appreciate your willingness to give a change a try. In the last couple of months since the last Board of Governor meeting, I've had the pleasure of attending both the Northern and the Southern California CEO Conference, and similarly to the comments that President Baca had about the trustees group, it's the attitude among all of our leaders, and I attended the faculty plenary as well, is certainly much more upbeat than it was just a year ago. So it's nice to have a little bit higher attendance at these meetings, and it's clearly a better environment than we saw just a year ago. I also was able to do the Chancellor's Circle at Los Medanos College last month, a very successful and warm welcome on behalf of that group. And a little bit later in the meeting, you'll hear Patrick Perry talk a bit about the scorecard that went live just a couple, 3 weeks ago. And again, our thanks to Diablo Valley College and Pierce College for hosting our statewide rollout of that activity. I also want to introduce a new colleague to all of you. You probably have seen the notification in one place or another, but it's really a pleasure to welcome our new Vice Chancellor for Governmental Relations, Vince Stewart. Vince, would you stand up and be acknowledged? Vince has done some foundation work most recently, and prior to that spent time with UC Davis, and even a little bit in his past worked under the dome in a variety of capacities. It's great to have Vince with us, and we genuinely are excited about the future as it relates to Vince's work with the legislature and the administration. And then finally, I would just mention to all of you, later this afternoon, the Board of Governors will host our annual legislative reception. Many of you received this invitation. It's at 5:30 over at the Cal Chamber. And if there's anyone in the audience who didn't get one of these invitations mailed to you, please do go ahead and come to the reception this afternoon. We'd be happy to see you there. Check in. Most of you will already have name badges developed, but if there's anybody who gets there and doesn't have a name badge, don't be embarrassed by that. We're very glad to have you with us. We'll have a number of members of the legislature there this afternoon, and we're going to be honoring the governor for his tremendous leadership on Proposition 30. So thank you all very much, and that concludes my report.
Good. Thank you, Chancellor Bright. We'll move on to the consent calendar, and we do have a...
President Baca, members of the board, I would like to pull one item from the calendar on page 17, item number 13-150-003. We have a challenge on that, an appeal on that particular grant, and so until that appeal is exhausted, we're going to pull that from the consent calendar. With that, I recommend the approval of the consent calendar.
Say the number again.
Yes, it's 13, it's on page 17 in the middle of the page, 13-150-003.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda, or consent calendar.
I'll move approval of the package.
Second.
Second?
Manuel,
Yes.
I have a question on page 3 of the minutes, item number 4. Unless I missed it, I didn't see the survey go out to the board members about committee appointments. Was wondering if we could get an update or clarification on that.
Okay, which item are you speaking to on the
Page
minutes?
3, item 4, board committees.
It's just a follow-up on that item.
Okay, just to follow up on it for staff?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay. Other discussion?
I just wanted to say something about the item on page 28, items 25 and 26. This is the annual renewal of the grants for some of our technology infrastructure, including our CC Apply and other projects. And I've always had some questions. Since these are major investments up to $4 million for one of the grants and up to $3 million for the other. And I did talk to Vice Chancellor Patrick Perry earlier to get clarification on some of these, because I want to make sure that we're making the best use of the system's resources and not duplicating things that are commercially available for far less cost. And so Chancellor Perry took some time to brief me about the budgets of both of these. And I'm looking forward to ongoing follow-up from the system office into making sure that we're getting the most value for the significant efforts, significant investments made by the system. It also pays for our cameras and the distribution of the video coverage of our Board of Governors meetings, too. But I was assured that just the Board of Governors coverage doesn't cost $4 million,
That's right.
because otherwise I would
Okay.
vote against that.
Vote against it, very well. Okay, noted. Member Belinsky?
Just to make some comments about the grants too. For grant mark number 12, I would say that it's important for us all to be aware of this employment outcome projects. I got the link, and I think that was very helpful to be aware of that. And I just want to say, because of the work I've done in the past, I'm glad to see again grants for the High-Tech Center, the alternate text production, and the distance ed captioning. It's something very critical to students in DSPNS and the programs. And the last thing, which I've mentioned to a couple of folks, the grant with CalPass, it might be helpful in the future to just hear more about CalPass and what's really going on with CalPass today, and even how colleges might integrate that more with their planning and their data and that kind of thing.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Member Ramos and a second by Member Isumi. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
We'll move on to action item number 1. Change of date for the January and May 2014 Board of Governors meeting. This item recommends approval of the change of date for the January and May 2014 Board of Governors meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay. Member Hawkins?
Second.
Second. Member Sumi? Discussion?
President Baca? On the May 2014 move, while I do understand the rationale for moving it for the May revise, I'd like to remind the board that that is also when the classified awards are given, and that puts us right into most final weeks, which may cause some scheduling difficulties with the winners to be present. I just would like to point that out.
Why don't, I will look into that. Why don't we have a conversation about that? We may want to move those awards to an earlier meeting, or we may want to make certain that, we don't run afoul of people trying to get here. So I understand what you're telling me.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, there being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Move on to action item number 2.2, 2013 California Community Colleges System Strategic Plan. This item recommends approval of the 2013 California Community Colleges System Strategic Plan.
So moved.
Okay, first by Vice President Baum, second was by Member Belinsky. Discussion?
Mr. President,
Member Ramos?
I'm really, really thrilled to see this coming to fruition, and I want to make a remark with an apology in advance, because unfortunately I was unable to participate with other board members at the last review of the plan because I was out of the country. But I love the plan. I'm going to vote for it. But what I would like to propose, not surprisingly to some of you who know my advocacy for the sustainability issues that I've been so involved with, is the possibility of going forward in our thinking about the next phases of our work, if there could be some way to think about the role of the system as a consumer, as a purchasing agent, as an exemplar or a kind of a significant template for the state in terms of conversion to more sustainable energy design, It may well be that in the portions that relate to innovation, there is a reference to innovation in terms of the Chancellor's Office function, that may be a drop-down locale for us to embed some of that work. And if there's any aid or assistance in members of the board engaging with the Chancellor and his staff to help that happen, I certainly, for one, would be available. Thanks.
Member Belinsky?
I just want to compliment everybody for the amount of work, especially Executive Vice Chancellor Bruckman, the amount of work that's been put into this. I do, and all of the other folks here at the State Chancellor's Office for the amount of work. I think it's critical to have the updated strategic plan. I mean, consistently we're telling colleges you must base everything on planning. You have to have your plans in place. Your plans do this. So I think this is great. And just to say publicly that the Student Success Task Force recommendations have been woven into this, very critical. The only question I have, because of what I see sometimes districts do, is whether somehow maybe on an annual basis there might be some kind of report that says this is what we accomplished, this is what we achieved in relationship to our plan, to even from one perspective market ourselves. So, because communication, in my point of view, is everything. So I'll leave it there.
Vice President Baum?
I wanted to take a moment to thank Member Belinsky for his contributions and leadership in working with the system in developing this, and also to the system leadership for listening carefully to the board in our last meeting and seeing how that process wove itself together to result in the document. But again, we were strengthened so much by our contributions through the leadership of Member Belinsky in working so closely. And it's such a strong document that I agree with him as well, that I hope that there's a thoughtful communication strategy to then take this down throughout the system to local districts, so that we can try our best to make sure local districts are in alignment with the system strategic directions as well. And so I know that I'm sure it'll be a topic at League and other conferences, but it'll be important for us to then tell the world that these are our priorities, and then also to see the work of Member Bach and others who are on the Student Success Task Force thoroughly integrated into this is terrific.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll just make one comment before we move on to the vote, and that is, having served in the planning phase of the strategic plan back, the original one, I was very happy that this has been updated. And Chancellor Harris, thank you very much for not reinventing the wheel, but taking the wheel and making it better. It needed an update, and including incorporation of a lot of the student success, the Student Success Task Force recommendations into the plan, among other things, because it is obviously more comprehensive than the Student Success Plan. So with that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item 2.2 is approved. Move on to action item number 2.3, 2014-15 capital outlay projects. This item recommends approval of the California Community College's 2014 proposed capital outlay spending plan. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Vice President Baum, Member Hawkins, and Catherine.
Thank you, members of the board, and Fred Harris is here to answer any of your questions. This is an item that you receive annually, and as you know, Standing Order 317 describes this process pretty carefully. So if you have any questions of Fred, by all means. Otherwise, we do recommend your approval.
Any discussion? Vice President Baum.
Just a question about how we'll end up being able to pay for all of this. A lot of this is contingent on a bond in the future. Is there any plans for a new bond for the state to fund these projects?
Yes. Good afternoon. Vice President Baum, that's correct. All the projects would be dependent on a new bond, new state bond, which would be a 2014 bond for these 2014-15 projects to go into effect.
And do we anticipate a bond being put on the ballot?
Well,
Or-
there's a lot of discussion of its demise, but there are 3 bills in the legislature moving forward with a state education bond. AB 41, Assemblywoman Buchanan, SB 301, Senator Liu, and SB 45, Senator Corbett. So there is a lot of interest to do this. I think the final determiner will probably be what the governor wants to do, but in his beginning, introduction to the governor's budget, he did not say no to an education bond. He basically, my interpretation of how he introduced it in what's called the A pages to the budget was he was leaving that up to the legislature to decide how to balance out the various priorities of the state.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, item 2.3 is approved. Item 2.4, action item 2.4, request for state approval of the Southwestern Community College District's National City Higher Education Center. This item recommends approval of the National City Higher Education Center in the Southwestern Community College District. Motion, please.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
First, Member Belinsky, second, Member Sumi. Chancellor?
Members of the board, I would again offer to you, our colleagues, to respond to any questions that you have. As the board knows, the process of approving centers and colleges was at one time under the purview not only of the board but of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission, CPEC, which no longer exists. And so this board now has the responsibility and authority for approval of centers and colleges. We are undertaking conversations about taking a look at that process in the near future, because now that CPEC no longer exists, we want this board to feel comfortable in the decisions that it makes. However, this request and the one that will follow, both from Southwestern, we want to assure you have both been thoroughly vetted through our office, and with that, I'd recommend your approval.
Any questions? Member Belinsky?
My question is largely because I don't know. And therefore, when you don't know, ask. And I am fully in support of 2.4 and 2.5, so that's not even an issue. But where does the money come from to increase the funding now because it becomes a center? And especially if, like 3 years from now, 4 years from now, one of the centers say, we want to become a college.
The answer to the first question is it comes out of the base apportionment. And so anytime a new center or a new college is approved, that money basically comes off the top of the annual funding for the community college system. The subsequent question, more centers, more colleges, is one of the reasons that we're going to take a look at this process. But again, there are instances where a center grows to a point where for some districts a college makes some sense. There are many other instances where a center is a center and it's that way in perpetuity. But again, whether it's a center or a college, that money comes off the top. Fred, anything I didn't say?
That was perfect explanation.
Vice President Baum?
Just to also educate us then too, what would be the rules that a board member should consider when considering the approval of the establishment of a center? What's the threshold that would make sense for a district to want to establish a center that we should support?
Well, there are a myriad of criteria that we look at. Sort of the easy ones are the ones that are enumerated on the item on page 57, 500 full-time equivalent students, on-site administrator, and so on. But I think that the other thing that Fred and his team look at carefully are the juxtaposition of existing colleges and centers to ones being proposed. Obviously, if you have a college and you go up the street a mile and want to put in a center, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's not only within the same district, but as you can imagine, adjoining districts usually have a lot to say about new centers or colleges being opened adjacent to ones that they have. So it is a complex process, involves a lot of time and review. Brad, what else am I missing?
In terms of there's several steps in the process. Even when CPEC was in existence, basically CPEC allowed us, they were nice enough to allow us to go forward and do the due diligence on review, and that due diligence continues. And it begins with a letter of, preliminary notice, kind of giving us a heads up that this is being anticipated, then a letter of intent, and there's a preliminary review that goes on primarily in the facilities unit relative to the siting and basically of the new facility. And then as the regulations require a needs assessment, which is a very involved analysis of both their ability to provide services on the campus, both academic and student services, in addition to the anticipated enrollments that are being projected out for a period of time, along with the fiscal wherewithal in terms of support all of this. And then that document is circulated throughout all the divisions in this office and reviewed from their level of core competency in terms of their programs on whether or not, in those divisions' opinion, what the district is proposing is sufficient. And then once that comes forward, and that's the case both with these two centers, then we're recommending approval to the board for the two sites. But it's a multi-year process that occurs. Also, in terms of the previous question, once the board approves a center, then they have to wait to the next fiscal year before they get any enrichment through the apportionment process beyond the normal FTE apportionment that they receive for the site.
But what could happen as the districts up and down the state go to more of a ward election system, being on a local board, you can see the political reality of a lot of districts. A board member will get elected from a certain geographic area and advocate strongly for the placement of an educational center in his or her part of the district. And I know that to be the case, but also to know that that it's more than just a political decision, but it's actually a thoroughly reviewed needs assessment decision as well that matches up is important.
Well, some think that even with the amount of extra apportionment that a district receives, that somehow is motivating people solely to do a center. But believe me, it's a great deal of work to both develop, prepare, and the expense is pretty enormous beyond what the districts receive from the state. And by the way, joining me is Dr. Melinda Nish, who is the CEO, Superintendent, President of the Southwestern Community College District, and I welcome her in terms of any comments regarding both the process and her two sites.
Dr. Nish, did you?
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board, Chancellor Harris. We're very pleased to be here. One comment with respect to Vice President Baum, just to let you know, all of the 5 governing board members in our district are at large. So there has not been any specific sort of political pressure for these particular sites. Just something unique to our district.
I didn't anticipate that, but I wanted to put it out there just
sure, as a possible pressure. Yeah.
I will say to the board, the center's approach, which, as Vice President Baum pointed out, has been used frequently in recent years, is an elegant and efficient and inexpensive way to serve growing areas in California. It's a whale of a buy for the taxpayer because centers they tend to be very efficient ways to deliver higher education as opposed to another full-blown college. Now, that's not to say that full colleges aren't appropriate in some instances. They certainly are. But these centers are frankly quite effective for California and for higher education.
Any other discussion? Okay, there being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Were those motions both for 2.4 and 2.5?
Well, let me move on to 2.4.
That would be very
2.5. 2.4 is approved.
Too easy.
And we'll move on to item 2.5, request for state approval of the Southwestern Community College Districts and Isidro Higher Education Center. Entertain a motion for that?
So moved.
Member Asumi, Member Storm, second. Discussion. There being none, All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, action item number 2.5 is approved. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much. And just
Thank
as a
you very
note,
much.
the San Ysidro Center has a history. I don't know for those of you who've been in the system or watching the news, this was a site where there was a massacre at
Oh, my gosh,
McDonald's.
yeah.
And this site has developed, and I've been in the system long enough to see it develop, and it's really neat to see how it has developed to serve the needs in that community.
It's a great
Thank you.
opportunity to have taken a tragedy and turn it into an opportunity for
Yeah.
an area that truly deserves open access. So I would like to thank each of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, move on to action item 2.6, Board of Governors sponsored legislation. This item recommends sponsorship of Assembly Bill 1100, the Levine, California Teleconnect Fund, and Senate Bill 576, Brock, Commission on Teacher Credentialing. All right, motion, please.
Move approval.
Vice President Baum, motion, second.
Second.
Member Belinsky. Okay, discussion. Chancellor?
Thank you. I will turn it over to Vice Chancellor Stewart and Mike McGee, who's done a lot of the legwork on this. If there are any comments or questions, Vince, any background on these?
Just briefly, President Baca, members of the board, Chancellor Harris, I think in your agenda, these two bills are analyzed and outlined on page 72. I think it's relatively straightforward. These bills, I believe, are non-controversial, so I think they should move through the process fairly easily. At least that's the hope. The first bill would eliminate a cap on the California Teleconnect Fund, which is a cap I think that the colleges have never hit. So it's really something that I think should again, face very little opposition, and is something that mirrors a statutory change that we're seeking as well. And then the other bill would, the block bill would add a Board of Governors representative to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and that would replace the CPEC position held previously.
Any questions, Vice President Baum?
I'm in favor of the legislation. The first one begs some question too, and it's not for this topic specifically, but are the districts leaving money on the table? It says 92 out of the 112 have asked for funding, and we've never hit our cap. Has the system been leaving money on the table with respect to this fund that's set up to support them? But that can be a question answered at another time.
We will get you an answer to that. Mike, any comment on that?
Vice Chancellor Perry might have a better sense of that, but we haven't left, from what I understand, any money on the table. It's more of a look forward to see, as we expand, as the governor has put forth an expanded online education proposal, that the cap could hold us back in the future. But as it is, and it has been going forward, there isn't any issues so far.
Thanks. Patrick, anything?
Okay, thanks. I wasn't aware of the 92 entities reference. We did here recently check, and all 72 districts had submitted paperwork to make CTF claims.
Okay.
So my understanding is, no, there shouldn't be any money left on the table. We are about ready to move into next year's budget, where we're going to be restoring campuses' circuits that they lost during the last downturn because of budget funds. And I know we were getting close to our cap, and when we restore those circuits, we're also concerned that we might overrun that. So we are the only entity in CTF that has an artificial cap placed on us, so we want to get rid of that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, there being none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, action item number 2.6 is approved. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Move on to action item 2.7, 2013-14 Career Technical Education Expenditure Plan. This item recommends approval of the 2013-14 Career Technical Education Expenditure Plan. Motion, please.
So moved.
Member Hawkins.
Second.
Second, Member Storm. Chancellor?
President Baca, members of the board, I'm going to ask Deborah Jones to brief you on this, but I do want to remind the board that, as the background piece says, this is the annual Carl Perkins Career Technical Education Improvement Act approval. And as you can see, a troubling trend in that we're seeing again a decrease of about $10 million from the previous year. This act is currently and has been for some time under consideration for reauthorization at the federal level. In the meantime, it continues to seem to slip and makes the job of Vaughn and Deborah and others even more difficult. But as we all know, Vaughn is back, probably traveling back now from the East Coast, where she was recognized by the White House earlier today. And she'll be here at the meeting tomorrow, so we can give her a rousing round of applause. But in her stead, Deborah Jones. Deborah, would you mind giving the board a quick update?
Sure. Thank you, President Baca, Vice President Baum, and Chancellor Harris. Turn to page 80. You'll be able to see the split. These career technical education funds come from the federal government annually, and like Chancellor Harris just said, we've taken a hit. It's about $10 million. We heard on Friday that we took another $1 million hit, so we're up past $11. This year it's due to sequestration. We anticipate another 8% reduction next year. So the Carl D. Perkins funds are divided into 3 different pots of funding. The first are state operations funds, and those are for 5% of the total funds. The second are leadership funds, and those are 10%. Those leadership funds are used for regional consortia activities, for professional development out in the field, professional development here in the office, the technical assistance that we give to the field. And the third funding source or funding pot is the local assistance dollars, and that's the greatest amount. That's 85%. Those go directly to the field. This amount is based upon a formula, economically disadvantaged students. The split between the California Department of Education and the Chancellor's Office has gone between 48 and 52% over the years. This year we're getting about 52% of the funds. Any questions?
Any questions? Well, I'd only comment that it's the federal funds for career technical education are vitally important. It really has become part of our structure of funding, unfortunately, and maybe there's probably some need to discuss further state funding of career tech education and not rely solely on the federal grants, which, as we see there, are decreasing. So with that, all in favor of this action item, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Action item 2.7 is approved. And now we have a number of first readings. Item number 3.1, credit course repetition and apportionment for course enrollment.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. I'm going to ask Barry Russell to present these next items, and would remind the board that these are first readings, and that after, I guess Barry's going to do the first one, and Steve will do the second, and that we will have a public hearing opportunity after each of these. Okay. So with that, I'll turn the first one on course repetition over to Dr. Russell.
Thank you very much, President Baca, Chancellor Harris, and board members. The item you see ahead of you for the first reading is basically a little cleanup language. As you know, we went through a very large change to the repeatability language this last year. Basically, the purpose of that language was to strongly reduce the number of courses that were being repeated by students who had successfully completed the course, but then were coming back and taking the courses over again. So the colleges are implementing that. They're far down the path and changing their policies on their local campus and so forth. As with any large change like that, we had a lot of questions from the field and a lot of cleanup, and in doing so, have found a few things along the way in the language that were things we didn't see coming when we first went through it. The largest one is represented by a change in the language, in the apportionment language, which unfortunately had a side effect of greatly limiting the college's ability to collect apportionment for classes that seem to be in the same area. Unfortunately, the limitation was supposed to only be for PE, fine arts, and performing arts courses that have a limit of 4 on them. And we didn't tie that language up close enough in the apportionment part of the regulations. And so the effect was that any course that was related was going to be limited to 4. And so we certainly didn't want to limit students' ability to take more than 4 courses for a program in history or English or other programs. So what this does is tie the language back to the 4 limits in PE, fine, and performing arts. Most of the other changes are just catching some definitions. We had moved the definitions all to the front part. We skipped a couple as we went back through, so we're moving those. We're correcting some citation changes throughout the document, trying to make it all clean. I do want to applaud the work of Michelle Goldberg on the staff here, who has been diligent in working with the staff in academic affairs, as well as the Academic Senate, in getting this information out. She's gone to several meetings and kind of co-chaired some of the work that has been going on. So I want to applaud the work that she's done to make sure we get all these little pieces pulled together. So with that, if you have any questions specifically, I'd be happy to answer those.
Member Belinsky?
It isn't a question specifically, but just so I remember the timeline. First reading, second reading in July. When would this then become official Title V language?
Well, it all depends on the approval from the Department of Finance following that. So generally, we look for probably a 6-month lead or so. The thing is, these changes are not changes, I think, that are going to cause a lot of need for a local campus or local district to change their policy necessarily. So I think it's not going to be as big as the other change, repeatability changes that really cause them to go through their whole curriculum. This is more structural and I think could be implemented fairly easily.
Vice President.
So I just want to be clear then too. Will it come back to us for a vote before it goes to the Department of Finance?
Yes,
as well?
we'll be open for public comment period. After the public hearing, there's a 45-day period of open comment. Then when we come back in July, we'll bring to you all of those comments and all of our responses to those comments. And then after you've had a chance to review all of those, the second reading will occur, and you can take a vote at that point.
And then I saw the exceptions for physical education, arts, or performing arts. So if it takes me 3 years to get through a community college program for my transfer program, but I'm involved also in the campus theater or play on an athletic team, I could take those classes for my 3 years each semester and still qualify and not be penalized for my participation?
Up to a limit of 4.
Up to
it does leave, it cuts off after 4 takes.
Right. But in performing arts as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So there will be a limit to a student's ability to continue in some of these programs that actually have the same course to play on the softball team or something like that.
Right. It will. This is kind of goes along with some of the other student success initiatives we have, which is, get in, get your work done, and move on, move to your completion. And so that's the message here as well. There are some students who take longer, and there may be mechanisms on the local campus to deal with that. There may be exemptions or not collecting apportionment and allowing a student who is really struggling to take a course another time. There are things that could happen along the way, but overall, This will limit the students to taking a class 4 times. When you complete it, you move on.
Right.
Member Belinsky?
But those are already in effect for fall of 2013.
Correct.
I mean, we've already passed those. From my perspective, the biggest change is this variable units.
Correct.
I mean, the finance stuff is in somebody else's court, but
Right.
the variable units, that if you thought you might be able to tweak this a little bit at the local level and say, oh, well, we'll just make all these courses variable units, that's been cut, and that will go away when these are the rules.
Correct. And we did investigate and to make sure we weren't unintentionally doing something wrong. And everybody we checked with said we don't need the variable unit, open entry, open exit courses in those areas.
Other comments? Questions?
You have a member of the public on this.
We will now hold a public hearing. The Board of Governors will now hold a public hearing on the proposed regulations. Public notice of the regulations was mailed and posted on April 25th. The public comment period is 45 days, and comments can be presented in writing or orally. Comments will be collected, and responses to comments will be included in the agenda materials for the next board meeting, at which time the board can take action to adopt the regulations. If anyone in the audience would like to comment, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Vice President Baum?
We have one comment card from Wayne, Oregon.
President Baca, members of the board, Chancellor Harris, good afternoon. My name is Wayne Oregon. I'm the Academic Senate President and Music Chair for Contra Costa College in San Pablo, California. I want to tell you a story about 5 Hispanic kids. They're all musically talented, but because of the schools they attended, when they came to us, like most of our students, without formal music training. Daniel Ruiz came to Contra Costa College as a self-identified lost cause. He had no idea what he wanted to do. He came from a poor family. He was starting to hang out with the wrong crowd. Then, on a whim, he took a piano class and liked it. He then took another, and then another, then a music theory class, and then more music classes. He came to us in the fall of 2008, but he will transfer to CSU Fresno with a scholarship in piano this fall. As Danielle told me, it was so hard to catch up, particularly when you're somebody like me who didn't have the advantage of a music program before college, and we gave him that time to catch up. Lucia Perez came to us in 2009. While she had played mariachi music from the age 10, she had not had the opportunity to have a formal music education. Like Danielle, her parents had not gone to college. She had never sung in front of people before. She is now an accomplished lyric soprano. We expect when she transfers next fall that she'll be highly sought after. We gave her the time to catch up. Daniel Hernandez came to Contra Costa College as a biology major, but he hated it. And he was on the verge of dropping out of college altogether. But he took a voice class 2 years ago. Like the others, the school that he came from did not have a music program to speak of. He's also trying to catch up, and he's making excellent progress. He intends to transfer as a vocal jazz major, but will we give him the time to catch up? These students, along with Celine Ruiz and Stephanie Rios, all have similar stories. They have also make up our vocal jazz ensemble, Jazzanova. And last week, it was announced that Jazzanova had won Outstanding Performance in the 2013 Downbeat Magazine's Student Music Awards for their recording Jazzanova 2012. Colleges, universities, and conservatories across the United States and Canada compete for this prestigious award, and these kids won it. The Berklee School of Music in Boston recognizes them as a top 5 college vocal jazz in the country. They just performed at the Monterey Jazz Festival. They're nationally recognized. This is student success. But had the new repeatability restrictions been in place when they started their college education, none of this would have occurred. They would not have transferred. They would have not have won scholarships. They would have not been nationally recognized. Solely because where they lived and who they were, their opportunities were limited. They had too far to go, and they would have run out of time. We would have lost them. We would have failed them. Their talent would have been wasted, and that is absurd. Talent is usually evenly distributed among population groups, but opportunity is not. We must give these students the opportunity to catch up and succeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice President Ball?
I just, because I'm glad that we're doing this over a couple of meetings, because in my experience too, there's a sense that students, as much as we want them to complete in 2 years, may take 3 or 4, and that some of these courses offer, keep students' persistence up. And so I'd be interested in hearing what ways districts can begin to mitigate some of these special cases that a student may need to repeat more so, or even if there's ways that, working with the foundation and others, that, that we can create some type of support to, that can be applied for special cases such as that we just heard and others. Because I know in my district too, if it wasn't for the intercollegiate athletic team, a student might not be enrolled at all, but they may only take 1 or 2 classes a semester to while their sports are. And how do we what options are we providing, or what guidance are we providing so districts don't lose students as a result of this repeatability issue?
All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on to first reading of item, action item, first reading item 3.2, non-resident tuition exemption. This item requests consideration for adopting changes to Title V regulations on page 92. Chancellor.
Thank you. As in the last item, this is a first reading, and Executive Vice Chancellor Bruckman will introduce the item, and then we will, after board comments, go to a public hearing. Steve?
Thank you, President Baca, Vice President Baum, members of the board, Chancellor. As the board knows, the non-resident students are required to pay non-resident fees. There are very specific exceptions in the law to that requirement. The legislature added an additional exception in the last legislative session to provide an exception for students who are the victims of trafficking, domestic violence, and other serious conduct. This regulatory change would bring our regulations in conformance with the state law.
Member Belinsky.
And I understand that this is law, so that's not the point of my question. The question is what would a student have to present to get this exemption, so that at the same time we're not like putting them in a very difficult situation? I'm just curious.
They would prove that they are the possessor of a T or U visa.
Oh, just have the visa, so they've gotten the visa from someplace else.
Right, and then meet the other requirements similar to the AB 540 students that are specified.
Vice President Baum?
Did we also make a provision for the AB 540 students so that they qualify for
Yes, that's already in our regulations.
That's already, yeah.
And then when we were in Washington, D.C., we talked a bit about also the challenges of veterans establishing residency. Is there anything that, if they might have been stationed here or how is it?
There are provisions providing for veterans to have residency under certain circumstances.
Okay, good.
But that's not an update. There's still some work that needs to be done along those lines. Correct?
Well, obviously, it could be broadened to provide more opportunity for veterans or former members of the military, but there are currently provisions to provide at least some benefit for those students.
On that point, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that newly elected Assemblyman Rocky Chavez has legislation to that point. So I suspect we'll be seeing that coming down the pipe.
Okay.
Is this the first reading, and we'll be back for a second reading?
Correct.
And then we'll vote on it?
Exactly.
The Board of Governors will now hold a public hearing on the proposed regulations. Public notice of the regulations was mailed and posted on April 25th. Public comment period is 45 days, and comments can be presented in writing or orally. Comments will be collected, and responses to comments will be included in the agenda materials for the next board meeting, at which time the board can take action to adopt the regulations. If anyone in the audience would like to comment, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. No public comments at this time. So we'll move on to item 3.3, Student Success and Support Program. This item will request consideration for adopting changes to Title V regulations. Chancellor.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. As Linda and Sonia come to the podium, simply let me say this is a very important plank in the ongoing implementation of the Student Success Initiative. I want to publicly commend Sonia and Linda for their work over the last several months, not only in the drafting and work with constituent groups on this proposal, but in their frankly exhausting travel up and down the state to every nook and cranny to make sure people know what's in this and what changes are about to occur, assuming the board approves it. So with that, I would turn it over to Linda Michalowski. Linda?
Good afternoon, President Baca, members of the board, Chancellor Harris. We are very pleased to present to you today for first reading regulations to implement provisions of Senate Bill 1456 that was also known as the Student Success Act of 2012. That was signed by the governor on September 28th of last year and became law on January 1 of this year. The bill requires the Board of Governors to revise the existing Title V matriculation regulations to align with the provisions of SB 1456, and also requires the board to adopt a new funding formula that includes services provided to students as part of the formula for allocating funds to the colleges. I want to point out to you that you have a copy of the regulations that was placed at your places this morning. It makes one correction from the version that that was printed in the board agenda, which is quite technical. It's just to make sure that a course sequence for career development or advancement was included in the definition of course of study. And I'll give my thanks to Michelle Pilati, President of the Academic Senate, for pointing out that omission to us.
What page is that on?
I'm sorry.
What page is that on?
That is on
99. 99? Thank you. Got it. Oh, got it. Thank you.
In November of 2012, the Chancellor's Office convened implementation work groups that have resulted in these regulations. They were comprised of key system stakeholders, including faculty, students, administrators, and technical experts from the colleges. There were 18 members of the work group that worked specifically on these Title V regulations. There was also a second work group that looked at the current MIS data elements that colleges use to report on the current matriculation program and to make the recommendations that you will see in the form of the funding formula recommendation. We also convened, well, both work groups worked over the course of 5 to 6 months. We also convened an ad hoc work group representing the categorical programs to get their perspective to contribute to the views on these regulations. And that included representatives from EOPS, CARE, DSPS, Financial Aid, CalWORKS, Foster Youth, and Veterans. And furthermore, we have conducted several webinars to make sure that those working in these areas at the colleges have been able to keep up with the proposed changes and provide their input. These regulations are core to implementing your recommendations stemming from the work of the Student Success Task Force. They address recommendation 2.2 from the Student Success Task Force, which calls on us to provide to mandated services to students of orientation, assessment, and counseling. It addresses recommendation 2.5 that students declare a program of study early in their educational career. It also addresses recommendation 8.2 that the board align our funding requests with the Student Success Initiative. And in addition, in the regulations, it carries out the requirements in SB 1456 that as a condition of receiving funding under these provisions, that community college districts cooperate in implementation of the Student Success Scorecard, and also that they comply with the requirement in SB 1456 to utilize a centralized assessment when we make such an assessment available, if they are using an assessment test as part of their assessment system. All of that is encompassed in these regulations. SB 1456 also addressed requirements for the BOG fee waiver, academic requirements for the BOG fee waiver, which was in recommendation 3.2. But you will receive a separate package of proposed regulations on those provisions. They're not here today. So there are just to give you the highest level overview of what these regulations do. In Education Code Section 78215, it defines the role of the Board of Governors in developing processes and policies for mandated student participation in the course services of orientation, assessment, and education planning. It also contains requirements that there be exemption categories provided for students and that districts adopt an appeal process. And then we'll talk, after we talk about the regulations, we will talk about the funding formula. So I'm going to let Sonia begin to talk through the specific changes that are before you. And I think what we'll try to do is talk about, summarize the changes in each article, and then give you an opportunity to raise any questions that you might have before we move on to the next article, if that's all right, President Baca. All right, Sonia Ortiz Mercado is Dean of Student Services, and she will walk through this.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the proposal to revise the Title V matriculation regulations, you'll find that throughout the proposal that the matriculation program as a name of the program has been revised as a Student Success and Support Program consistent with SB 1456. The matriculation regulations were first adopted well over 20 years ago when the Seymour Campbell Matriculation Act of 1986 went into effect. And so the regs are well over 20 years old, and so you'll notice that we've updated terminology. We've tried to improve the organization and clarity of the regulations. We've aligned the language in the matriculation regs with Senate Bill 1456, specifically targeting funding to the provision of orientation, assessment, and student education planning. We have new terms that are identified in SB in the proposed regs that didn't exist 20 years ago. For example, career goal is a new term that SB 1456 now requires students to not only identify an educational goal upon enrollment, but also a career goal. We define that in the framework of these proposed regs, as well as terms like course of study, which is a term that was introduced through the Student Success Task Force recommendation as program of study during as the bill moved forward through the legislature. That term was changed to course of study. We define that term as well. The bulk of the changes, though, really are on recommendation 2.2, the mandated services, what we require our students to complete. So you'll see that in Article 4 in particular is the section on not only the student requirements, but our institutional requirements to provide those services. The approach that our implementation work group took in developing the Title V proposal was to take a value-added approach to streamline reporting requirements where we could by tying it to the ARC scorecard, the Student Success Scorecard, and to provide a policy framework. To the extent possible, we wanted to provide districts with the flexibility to implement the provisions of the new regulations and SB 1456 to meet student needs. And so what you'll find is that what we've identified is the what colleges have to do, but who does it and how colleges do it is completely up to the college to figure out on how to implement. So as a general overview of the proposed regs, we essentially have 4 articles for matriculation that we are proposing to revise. Article 1 is scope and definitions. Article 2 is the planning administration, which includes sections on program plans, evaluation and audits, funding, and the services that our districts are required to provide. Article 3 goes into greater detail on what those services, as far as the minimum requirements are for orientation, assessment, counseling, advising, and other education planning, as well as follow-up services. And Article 4, as I had mentioned earlier, is the section on the mandates, right? It's the policy that students complete orientation, assessment, ed plans, and identify a course of study. So you'll see the detail on what the timelines are and how those are defined in that section. As a general overview, I'll focus on the changes that are required by SB 1456, but as Linda mentioned, we'll pause after each of the articles. If the board has any questions that you'd like to have addressed, we'd be more than happy to do so. So under Article 1, Scope and Definitions, you'll notice that the language has been added to mirror the intent language of SB 1456. But we also note that what we heard clearly from our colleges, that it was important to highlight in this section that student success is the responsibility of our institutions. It's not solely the responsibility of student services, and that it really is a partnership between instructional and student services and programs to help our students succeed. So you'll see that noted up front as we move through the regulations. In this section under definitions, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see several new terms identified. Career goal, course of study. Linda mentioned that the version that was handed out to the board this morning includes the addition of career advancement to clarify that that was what was intended under the definition of course of study. Educational goal is defined, as well as other education planning services, in addition to the provision of counseling and advising services. If the board has any questions on Article 1, we'd be more than happy to address them.
Any comments?
And Article 1 goes to page 100. Is that correct?
Yes.
Member Belinsky?
Just one comment, because I think it's good that it's finally here, and that is a definition of multiple measures. Because it needs to be happening more.
Right.
So
Right.
thank you.
Okay. And on that, one of the things we also tried to look at was current research and what the research was identifying as effective practice. In the case of assessment, quite a lot has happened in the last 20 years.
Right.
And so we see the Long Beach data on the use of multiple measures, high school transcript data resulting in greater student outcomes in course placement. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided a better definition of terms such as that.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Article 2. Article 2 really focuses on the planning and administration. So it's really the operational aspect of the Student Success and Support Program. Section 55520 delineates the required services, and again, those the funding is targeted to the provision of orientation, assessment, counseling and advising, and other education planning, as well as follow-up services to at-risk students. You'll also see in this section that the follow-up services to at-risk students is identified as services to students who are on academic and progress probation, students facing dismissal, basic skills students, and students who are undeclared. This section also targets program reporting to the ARC 2.0 Student Success Scorecard that was recently released a few weeks ago. And also there is a section on funding that is tied to the requirements in SB 1456. So that is that the board would need to adopt a funding formula that takes into account the potential population of students to be served, so the head count of a college, as well as the number of students served. at the college as well, and a match requirement. In this section, you'll note that the match requirement that we've historically had for the matriculation program for the last 20 years, 3 to 1, is maintained, underscoring the importance of having our institutions have a commitment to providing these very important services to our students, in addition to the funds that the state invests in the student success. Any questions on Article 2?
Member Belinsky?
Yeah, Article 2 goes to what page, just so I know? To 105?
So it covers program plans, data collection and audits, program effectiveness and improvement, professional development, funding. Yeah, 105, and required services.
My first question is, just so that I know, colleges each will have to develop a student success and support program plan. Will that plan have to be filed here with the State Chancellor's office?
That plan would be submitted to our office.
And if it's not submitted?
We will follow up with the college.
Okay. And I assume there'll be some kind of an outline with the plan when this comes into effect of what elements need to be there.
Absolutely. We plan to convene a small work group of practitioners to develop the actual plan itself.
Oh, okay.
So that, you know, we always try to make sure that we're doing it in such a way that colleges have the easiest possible time providing the information, and so that we don't duplicate information that's being provided in another form.
The other thing it mentions is the student equity plan. And I already thought that was supposed to be in place, but are colleges doing that?
We haven't requested colleges to submit a student equity plan. I believe the last time was 2005, 2004, 2005. The equity plans are done typically every 3 to 5 years, but at the time that we would have requested new equity plans, the budget cuts hit in 2009-10. And at that point, we put a moratorium on requiring colleges, because of the significance of the cuts that happened in our system, on any new planning efforts. And then once we started moving forward with the Student Success Task Force, and we were unclear about, where we would end up with the new recommendations, we again held off on requiring new plans. So now with the new Student Success and Support Program, it makes sense to have both planning efforts happen at the same time, because as colleges are planning the services that would be delivered to students, we want to be mindful of any equity issues along the way, especially as we look at some of the other reforms we've made in the area of enrollment priorities and the proposed changes to the BOG fee waiver program.
And I think the approach that the Student Success Task Force took of making sure that our primary measures via the scorecard include a way to monitor our equity impacts is very, very important to make sure that, that we do stay focused on that moving forward. So we convened a work group just a couple of weeks ago to look at student equity planning in light of the new student success plans. And we will be moving forward soon to work with colleges to update those.
And just a comment on something I said before, which starts on this page, and that is there's the use of the term policy. And I would hope that locally we could make a distinction between what a policy is, that in some instances it might be an approved administrative procedure. And I think you said that as long as you have something in place that's approved and you're holding to, that would be acceptable. In terms of the annual financial audit, which is on the next page, that isn't currently set up. That would be something colleges would be required to put into place once these are official.
Well, districts,
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
So districts are required to, it's the contracted district audit manual. They have the single audits that happen each year. And so in the past, matriculation was one of the items that through the audit teams the districts would have to address. And so we would, once these regs would go into effect and some time, districts had time to implement, that item would likely go back into the contracted district audit manual.
Yeah, just so that everybody picks up to put that in their annual audit. On page 104, my only question with professional development is, will there be any funding at some point in time, or in order to provide the ability to do professional development? Because that becomes the issue today, that there just isn't enough funding for professional development.
So colleges, as part of the administration and coordination of these services on the campus, could allocate a portion of the funds that they receive through the Student Success Support Program to support professional development activities that are tied to implementation of these services.
However, to expand on your question, Member Malinsky, I think it is incumbent on this board to consider in our out-year budget requests the need for professional development funding. And we all know that the state funded that in a pretty healthy way up until this budget crisis hit, actually a few years before that. So it certainly continues to be a priority.
Yeah, important.
Yeah, we need to be clear on that, on this item as well as some other ones with regard to the funding and actual implementation of some of these ideas. So.
Right. And the only other question I have in this section is there a sense of when the common assessment will come into place? Because, I think that also will help to save some money that could then be, allocated in other areas. But, because I know various districts are looking forward to this.
We've been working with Vice Chancellor Patrick Perry and with the fiscal side of the House in trying to identify the resources that would be necessary to make a common assessment available statewide. If we can get the funding, we will move forward with it. We've laid all of the pieces in place to bring about a statewide common assessment. We did extensive work with the faculty and the assessment professionals to identify what we want. We had passed legislation that said we should use an off-the-shelf instrument. So we're still looking for opportunities to make that happen. And at the same time, the environment has become so much more complex, both because of the research that shows that alternatives to assessment tests are sometimes more accurate in identifying placements. And in addition, the work that we're doing with Smarter Balanced and the K-12 implementation of a Common Core that's putting in place a new assessment in the K-12. So we're monitoring and balancing and juggling all of these pieces and looking for the money to make it happen.
I want to underscore that. I think the landscape really has changed in the last year or two, and we're in, as you can imagine, very close conversation with the Academic Senate, and I think our shared goal is to make it increasingly easier for students to, whether it's a common assessment, whether it's transcript evaluation, whether it's whatever the multiple measures may be, the goal is to make it easier for the student who is often transient and ends up at more than one of our institutions, so that students are not called upon to repeat testing or assessment multiple times.
Any further comments?
Okay, so Article 3 then is the focus on the Student Success Support Program services, and this is where the regs go into greater detail on each of the core services that our colleges would be required to provide. So you'll see a framework for minimum requirements for orientation. Although orientation was required as a service that colleges were supposed to provide to all students coming into our system for the last 20-some years, there was never a specific section on orientation, so that is new. You'll see that there's the clarified language in assessment, a clarification of terms, a better definition of multiple measures in the assessment section. You'll see the section on counseling, advising, and introducing the new term other student education planning services. That section has been expanded to align with the concepts in SB 1456. And in particular, because of the prominence of student education plans, the importance of student education planning in many of the Student Success Task Force recommendation, in Section 55524 on student ed plans, the work group attempted to better define what an SEP, or Student Education Plan, is, and actually propose two definitions. One would be an abbreviated Student Education Plan that could be targeted 1 term or 2 in length, targeted to students who are undeclared, first-time students coming in who are undecided. So a short-term ed plan that makes sense, that helps provide students with an opportunity for structured exploration and a foundation coming in. But then the comprehensive ed plan, distinguishing between a more detailed comprehensive ed plan that would span multiple terms in length, when a student actually knows what they want to do and have identified that course of study, what they might want to major in, the program that they might want to complete, or their ultimate goal at the college. You'll see some principles. So taking from some of the research themes that we heard clearly from a lot of the different organizations, from the Community College Research Center to the RP group, the concepts that student education plans be timely and accessible to students, and that they be electronic in form. You'll see that those principles noted in this section as well. I'll go ahead and pause at this point if anyone has questions on article.
Comments?
And that article goes to through page 111.
On page 107, in case you have some suggestions of where to get these kinds of things, in 2B, it speaks to sample test preparation. And I've been reading that students who do take assessment tests, if they've done some kind of preparation, it does cause them to be less fearful, or whatever the terminology is for the test, and they tend to do better. But I'm not aware of many places that provide sample test preparation. So is that something that would come with this common assessment?
Well, I think what we envisioned, so some of the focus on assessment, and in the program plans you see the section that really says, you know, colleges, what are you doing in the area of assessment, was a result of West Ed did a study called One Shot Deal, and where they studied our colleges and found that many of our colleges weren't doing sample tests, right. And that assessment policies, or the high stakes nature of assessment tests for students coming into the system weren't very well communicated to students. And so in this case, we put in requirements to identify, to make clear what are colleges doing in this area. I think through technical assistance and support, we'd want to help move in this direction. And certainly when we move to centralized assessment, we would want to make sure, because those are best practices, we want to make sure that that system of assessment would encompass those pieces.
So that would be a part of this ongoing process, because it'd be helpful.
Yes.
Right. On page 109, because I'm not getting this, so to speak, 4C, we're supposed to notify students this semester if they've got the potential to lose enrollment priority, and they could lose it by being on academic or progress probation or exceeding a unit limit, which I think is 100 units. Now, in the next sentence, it says that they can receive appropriate opportunity to, they can get all these services so that they have the opportunity to maintain fee waiver eligibility or enrollment priority. But if they've had the 100 units, and that's the part I'm not.
The 100 units means they need intervention sooner to make sure that they can complete a program by the time they reach 100 units. And in the enrollment priority regulations, there are requirements that colleges begin notifying students this semester if they are within 75% of the 100-unit cap. I think the point here was to make sure that in SB 1456, both in the provisions dealing with student success and also in the BOG fee waiver provisions, there's a very clear legislative expectation that we will make every effort to provide the supports that at-risk students need to be able to continue to enroll and receive their BOG fee waiver. So I think we were trying to draw attention to the importance of finding ways to focus services on these high-risk students so that they can, in fact, be successful.
So they could file a petition, so to speak, that even though they've got 100 units, because I'm doing X and I've got this plan and I'm working with the counselor, that I could still maintain my enrollment priority.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, districts can adopt policies for appeals.
Okay.
Further comments?
Okay. Article 4 is the final article, and that is where the regulations lay out the rights and responsibilities of students and the responsibilities of institutions. The original concept of matriculation was that it was an agreement between a student and an institution about how to make a student, help a student identify their goals and then be successful in reaching it. So in Article 4, it requires that first-time students, meaning first-time enrolling at the institution, have to identify a course of study, be assessed for course placement, and develop, at a minimum, an abbreviated student education plan. Now, you might have a student come in who knows exactly what they want to do, and they may be able to develop a full education plan right out of the gate. But we suspect that most students will do an abbreviated plan to start with until they get some units under their belt and have a better understanding of where they're going. By the time the student completes 15 degree applicable units, or prior to the end of their third term of enrollment, whichever comes first, students will be required to declare their course of study. There will be nothing to preclude a student from changing their course of study as they move forward, but a lot of the research that we looked at in the course of the Student Success Task Force showed how important it is to have students identify where they're going in terms of their ability to reach that goal. A college can require continuing students to also undergo these services if the district has the capacity to do so. But ultimately, if the services are provided to all new students, first-time students, then ultimately all of our students will have had the benefit of these services. And focusing on first-time students seems to be the way to make this practical and feasible for our institutions. If a student does not complete the matriculation requirements under the regulations that you've previously adopted, it would affect their ability to utilize priority enrollment. So there are strong incentives for students to comply. For institutions, they're required to adopt and communicate clear policies to students on what their rights and responsibilities are, and to make sure that those requirements are clearly published and communicated. Institutions are required to make the core services available to first-time students by the fall of 2015, and notify students by the spring of 2015, preceding fall, of what will be required of them and available to them. The language also encourages districts to avoid duplication of effort. Sonia mentioned the requirement that education plans be electronic. One reason for that is we want one education plan to follow the student. So if you have a student who's entered the institution, has worked with the counseling department to develop a student education plan, and that student is referred to services from the Disabled Students Program, for example, that student should not end up with two education plans. That student should end up with an education plan that includes the input from DSP&S that addresses their particular disability and need for accommodations. But, I've heard horror stories of students who have 6 education plans. And I don't understand what a student is supposed to do with that. It doesn't provide any useful guidance. So the focus is on making sure that the student is being served across the institution and ends up with one set of advice. And then the language in this section also highlights the importance of aligning course scheduling and the courses that are available to students to match what the students have been advised that they need. And that also is an outgrowth of the Student Success Task Force that my colleague, Vice Chancellor Barry Russell, is working on from another side. And then finally, there's a section on exemptions. Historically, under matriculation, the Board of Governors have the authority to define exemption criteria to tell institutions which students did not need to go through these services. This is more clear in the regulations about the factors that districts can take into consideration in developing an exemption policy. It specifically says if a student already has a degree, an associate degree or higher, then they can be exempted. If they're enrolling at the college for an avocational purpose, or for a specific certification program, such as the police academy or fire academy, then the district would not be required to provide these services. And it also exempts special high school concurrent enrollments from the student success service requirements. And then it allows the colleges to provide the services to exempted students if the resources are available. So that is Article 4.
Thank you.
I don't have any specific. I don't have any specific question per se, but was this taken to Consultation Council a few weeks ago, and what was their feedback, input?
We went through it in somewhat more detail with Consultation Council than we're doing with you today. There were minor suggestions, some of which we were able to incorporate into this version. Sonia, do you want to make any comments on that feedback?
I would say for Article 4, there weren't any substantive changes. If anything, there were clarifying or just minor edits that were made to the other sections of the articles for the Student Success and Support Program.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. The Board of Governors will now hold a public hearing on the proposed regulations. Public notice of the regulations was mailed and posted on April 25th. Public comment period is 45 days, and comments can be presented in writing or orally. Comments will be collected, and responses to comments will be included in the agenda materials for the next board meeting, at which time the board can take action to adopt the regulations. If anyone in the audience would like to comment, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Vice President Baum.
Our first comment is from Will Bruce.
How you doing? President Baca, Chancellor Harris, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak. First of all, I'd like to thank Linda and Sonia for their great work. They successfully inputted suggestions from our EOPS Association as it concerns EOPS and the matriculation Title V revisions, and we thank them for that. We are all partners, I wanted to first of all say, on our prospective campuses with 1456 and the implementation of it. Our campus, all the groups, student services, as well as academic affairs, have gotten together and formed a task force to implement these. And a lot of these changes are going to happen through technology, like she was talking about, online orientation, electronic SEPs, and that's commendable. EOPS is an already proven successful program. We were also cut over 40% as we had to limit our services and turn down eligible EOPS students each year. Restoration is needed to happen equally to our already successful programs that serve the lowest income, educationally disadvantaged students. We provide 100% of our EOPS students with orientation, assessment, SEPs, intrusive counseling, contacts, and progress reports, which is follow-up for our students each semester. Our successes is further proven with our EOPS impact study from the RP group last year. If we were restored at the same levels as the new matriculation program, then funding based on hard work and services EOPS already provides is not an issue. However, if the funding is restored unequally, then we must ask the question. This question was posed at the categorical implementation work group Linda referred to earlier. Both EOPS and KPED and a few other members, deans from matriculation also asked these questions as well. With 60% of the new funding formula based on services that EOPS already provides, such as orientation, assessment, student education plans, counseling, advising, Will the EOPS be eligible to receive some of the new funding that is based on student headcount? Or will the EOPS headcount be taken out of that formula? Those are the questions we must ask. I mean, are we getting, if there's increased funding for the matriculation program, and it's based on SEP. SEP's 35% of the SEP is based on the formula, and we provide comprehensive SEPs for all of our EOPS students 30 days after they reach in our program. We also provide 6-semester planners with over and above what is required. We look forward to working with our partners on campus to help move our system towards student success. As our students continue to say, success is spelt with 4 letters, EOPS. Thank you.
Our next public comment is from Richard Hansen.
Good afternoon, Chancellor, President, and members of the board. I served on the Student Success Task Force that got us started toward this day, and then also on the MIS and allocation group that put together many of the components that you have before you right now. And in that process, I had some disagreements with what happened and agreements with a lot of it, and won some battles, lost others. And on the what I want to talk about today is a bit related to Will Bruce's comments. It's about funding. And for faculty, the main issue has always been to make sure we fund this adequately. And one of the things we started the task force with was the idea that we might do something that would have no cost implications, but I think that became very clear as we proceeded that would be impossible. So one of the things we discussed in the task force was that when we came to this point to fund the Student Success Initiative, we had to convince the legislature to fund this in addition to instruction. You know, we have a pretty decent instructional way of funding the colleges based on FTES, but unfortunately the legislature always underfunds the student service side and slashes it when the time comes to make budget cuts. So that needs to change. This needs to be a plan that will provide enough funding to make this work. For faculty, that's going to mean an adequate counseling staff. A lot of the discussion here was about BOG fee waivers, students getting on probation. They need face-to-face counseling assistance. If we think we can do it with computers as a shortcut, that will work for some students, but by far not nearly anything close to the majority of our students. So that's the number one issue. The second issue is that we do have this kind of bifurcated approach right now of funding instruction on the one hand and this initiative on the other. And in that regard, I want to bring up the problems perhaps in the 3-to-1 match. And if this was discussed at consultation, I apologize. I stepped out to go to a breakout for the Senate plenary at that point. But I would have raised this there also. In the discussions in the MIS and allocation group, this was an issue as well. Because if this were to get the legislature's attention and get significant funding, a 3-to-1 match will become a major drain out of the instructional side into this program. And I know that what went forward from the group was maybe a phase-in, that as we got more funding, we might think about reducing that match. The student service folks were very worried about starting off at like a 2-to-1 match or 1-to-1 match. You heard the idea that it's kind of a buy-in on the part of the colleges. I don't know whether that really holds water, but it is a way to have more funding there available to a program that's always been so underfunded. So from that perspective, I get it. But if we were to win this argument when we go to the legislature with this plan, let's be prepared to change that 3-to-1 match. If it's funded well, it can exist on its own. Thank you very much.
Our last card is from Debbie D. Thomas.
President Baca, Chancellor Harris, and members of the board. Good afternoon. I'm Debbie D. Thomas, and I'm the Vice President of Student Services at Norco College, and I'm pleased to be here today representing the Chief Executive Board of the Chief Student Services Officers. The Chief Student Services Officers would like to publicly support the Title V changes which are before the Board of Governors today. We would like to thank Linda Michalowski and Sonia Ortiz Mercado for leading these changes. They have literally included hundreds of people, including over 20 CSSOs in the process of developing these changes. I served on one of these committees, and I can tell you that it was clear at every meeting that between the meetings, the staff members of the Chancellor's office were working tirelessly and collaboratively to ensure that the work of the work groups was congruent and that constituency groups were kept informed. An example of this is that Sonia and Linda both participated in weekly telephone conference calls with the CSSO board during this entire process. We believe that the Title V changes will improve our opportunities to increase student success at our colleges. While the process was very intense and very challenging, and we know that actual implementation is going to be even more intense and more challenging, we believe that these changes will improve our student success, which is the whole goal of the Student Success Act of 2012. We encourage you to improve these changes at your July meeting, and we ask for your continued support of our efforts to increase student success at our colleges. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Baum.
That concludes the...
Thank you very much. We will now take a 15-minute break.